Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Unscripted Reviews with me, Freebiewits, your host. And today we're taking a look at Dragon's Dogma, Dark Arisen. Now before we begin, I do want to read out a bit of the game's history. And yes, I know this is supposed to be unscripted, and it still is for 99% of the review. It's just that right here I just want a bit of background for context's sake. For the sake of context. Way back when, this game was released back in 2012 on May 22nd for the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3. And let me just say, it did not run all that well, 30 FPS and such like that. However, I bought it as soon as it came out, and I loved it because of the magic system, which is hell of a lot ironic since I didn't actually play as a magic character when I got it. I played as a bow and arrow type guy because I saw how many different types of arrows there were, and I wanted to be Batman, or the Green Arrow I suppose is more accurate here. Now about a year later, Dark Arisen, a little expansion version of the game, got released that made it even better with HD textures and whatnot. Also for the 360, and it wasn't until 2016 I think it was. I'm just looking on the internet right now. According to this, the Windows version of Dark Arisen was released. Ooh, that was a bit of a burp. The Dark Arisen worldwide release was on 2016, 4 years later. And what's more, this was on the computer. I did say that. I think I mentioned that. Anyways, that's the version I'm playing today on my computer with a controller. So it is a bit nostalgic. That means I've bought the game 3 times. Please don't do that. I was dumb and young. I'm probably dumb and old now. But the point is, please don't buy the same game 3 times in a row. It's not worth it. Would I recommend Dark Arisen on the PC to people? And well, that's what I'm here to review the game for. To begin with, I'd like to compare Dark Arisen, or at least I'd like to describe it as a cross between Skyrim, Monster Hunter, Shadow of the Colossus, and the Soul series, all smushed into one single game. All the good bits of slaying giant monsters, climbing up them, a big giant world to explore, all these different paths and choices that you can make, difficulty, lots of dungeons and treasures to find, all that good stuff, and all the bad stuff as well. You've got the tedium of traveling a world without much in the way of fast travel, unless you use fairy stones, in which case you can teleport to checkpoints and like. You don't really have mounts, so you can't really travel the world that way, unfortunately. Simply put, it's not fun to travel the world for travel's sake. It's fun to explore. Other downsides is it's pretty buggy here and there. It's a lot better on the PC version and such like that. Fights do get a bit repetitive because enemies are just big damage sponges for the most part. Grabbing onto enemies can be a bit weird sometimes. There's a lot to love about the game, but there are a lot of annoyances and such like that. And my recommendation is, if you can play a game and ignore the bugs or the annoyances and such like that, if you've ever played a Bethesda game and saw past all the flaws and such and still loved it, I'd like to think that this would be the game for you. So what about those good points I mentioned? Well, the character creator is practically one of the most in-depth I've ever seen. And here's the thing. Besides the aesthetic parts, being taller, heavier, so on and so forth actually does impact gameplay. The bigger and bulkier you are, the less likely you are to be knocked over by heavy winds, the less likely you are to be carried off by certain enemies. The more you can weigh them down and tire them out and such like that, the smaller you are. That actually affects your hitbox. So being small has its own advantages as well. It lets you also run through little tunnels in certain parts of the map and such like that. Hitboxes, like I said once again, that's a big play. So I played as a tall, skinny character, so I got all the disadvantages of a big character, but none of the advantages either. There is one good thing about playing a tall character that I did find though. It's that I can reach far further up than shorter characters would otherwise be able to reach. And of course, being a light character, I don't weigh myself down as much, so when I grab onto a monster, I'm not tired as much. So I guess there are good points and bad points regardless of what you do. Next thing I'd like to address is the pawn system. Now, when you start the game, you get a bunch of pawns to help you out, and eventually you get what I will call your partner, the main pawn that you make. And I will call this your partner because they level up with you and they grow alongside you, all that stuff. The other 2 pawns that you can get, they're snapshots of other people's partners that you can get and put into your party, but they don't level up with you. To have them level up, you've got to retire them and then hire them back. And based on their level, it may cost in-game currency. It's not gold, it's something else. I think it's called the Rift currency or something like that. Rift crystals, maybe? Something like that. The higher level they are, the more Rift crystals they cost. But if they're at your level, then they cost nothing, which is convenient. Now, the game, in my opinion, does always online correctly, in that it doesn't always have to be online. You can play an offline version of the game perfectly fine, and the game will just generate a bunch of random pawns for you to hire in the future, using its own system and such like that. But I would recommend going online because the builds that people make for these characters is way better than whatever the computer makes. Also, knowledge, that's actually a fun thing. Depending on how you fight enemies and such like that, your pawns can actually learn how to fight them better. So if you are fighting this lizard crocodile thing and they get more affected by lightning, or they're more weaker if you hit them in the tail, and your pawn sees you do that, then they will go, oh, I'll do this next time to take advantage of this creature's weakness. And they'll carry that on to other people's games if they get hired. And then the players' pawns will see this and go, oh, I can do this too. And your pawns can learn from other pawns as well. So if you have a friend in real life who's played a mission that you haven't, and then you get their pawn might sometimes say, hey, master, come this way. I've been here before. It's fantastic. It's like all the advantages of multiplayer while still being isolated and on your own. And when you discharge a pawn, you can rate them and even give them a little gift to bring back to their masters. And your pawn does the same. So occasionally, if you log off and then log back into the game and go to the end, your pawn will eventually come back and say, hey, I've been adventuring. I got this stuff and these ratings. I'm this helpful. I'm this attractive. You get the idea. Now, on to combat. Is combat fun? Absolutely. So there are a bunch of different classes. You've got your bow and arrow with daggers, you've got your sword and shield, and then you've got your usual mage. And there are cross classes and prestige classes beyond those. So you've basically got the more offensive mage, you've got the two-handed swordsman, you've got the bow guy who focuses mostly on the bow and becomes a freaking sniper rifle in the with 2 hands. And then you can have cross class, you can have the assassin who's a cross between a warrior and the archer guy, you can have a magic archer, you can have a magic swordsman. You get the idea. It's very D&D fair. And the way it works is that if you're playing with a controller at least, you jump with the A button, you light attack with the X, and then you heavy attacks with the Y. You can also grab things, but I'll get to that later. And if you press one of the triggers, it swaps all the buttons and lets them do different things, which you can map yourself. So you can make your X turn from a light attack into a lunge, or into a downward giant slash, or a fireball, depending on your class. You get the idea, that sort of thing. But the grab button, oh, this is my favorite button. I've sort of touched upon it, but the idea is that if you go up against a large creature, you can grab onto them, climb all over them like a little cockroach, and stab them in the more sensitive parts. If they're a smaller monster, you just hold on to them, like, you know, full Nelson style, like from behind, so that your allies can smack them really good. You can also use this button to grab pots off the floor and throw them at enemies. If the pots are filled with liquid, or coat them in it. They could be explosives. You can also use this button to grab allies and, like, throw them out of harm's way. I very much like that idea. You can pick up enemies off the ground if they're knocked over, and then throw them off cliffs into harm's way. Of course, if you do that all the time, then you won't really get the loot off them, but hell if it isn't entertaining to do that sort of thing. My point is, Dragon's Dogma is a very, very flawed game, but goddamn, is it fun. Do I recommend it? And the answer is absolutely. Get a controller, get it on the computer. Try not to get it on Xbox 360. Not that many places sell Xbox 360s anymore. The performance issues and such like that, much better on the PC. And if you have a friend who's played the game, and you befriend them in-game and so on and so forth, you can hire their higher level partner for free. And essentially, your friend will be able to guide you through the game without being there themselves. Anyways, that's my review of Dragon's Dogma. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and hey, if you ever run into my partner, well, just know that he's a big, strong guy, and he can hold all your stuff. I made him to be a pack mule. Anyways, that's my review of Dragon's Dogma Dark Arisen on the computer, and I hope you've had a wonderful day, and bye-bye.
Ugh.